Hey everyone, and welcome back to the first Fight Chat Friday of 2022 here from TKD Coach Academy. This week we are looking at how to have a more threatening sidekick and how to train for having a more threatening sidekick, giving you some examples from recent competition and some very good exponents. So if that seems like something you need to work on, stay with us for this episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this first episode of 2022. So the idea with having a more threatening sidekick basically is a lot of people have that ability to push off the front leg, but sometimes there's no real threat behind it, and that's important because if you don't, somebody might be able to close down, cut you down with their hands, or maybe counter that kick of yours quite easily. So it's important to have a bit of substance behind it and a little bit of a threat. So we're going to go through some ways that you can make your front leg a bit more threatening in your sparring moving forward, and to have a little bit more of that substance behind it.
Yeah, I suppose important to say, it's not essential that you have a threatening sidekick to be effective in the modern game, but it's certainly a tool that very many fighters will have, if they're being consistently successful over time. So I suppose the first thing, and we kind of decided we'd start with, well, what is the intent of the shot? Because straight away when we talk about people who are beginning in sparring, they're getting their feet wet. We see it in every club. They assume that if I'm going to pick up my front leg to kick, it's trying to score. And there's always more to it than that, and you have more options when you pick up the front leg than that. So let's have a look at some examples and maybe talk a bit about the intent in terms of picking up that front leg and getting some action going.
Yeah, it's important that you mention that it's not always to get the score either, because we've seen it now over the last couple of episodes on Fight Chat Friday that for maybe like every 10 front leg shots you throw, there might be only one land. So it's important that it's not all about just giving it gung-ho on each technique, but when you find the opportunity, that you're going for it. And you can see with all these clips so far that the intent is there, and they all look very threatening. And Thomas Barada here is one of the goats at this. Always one of the better people with a sidekick, and always has good intent behind it.
Well, that's it. But I mean, even in terms of pushing forward, if you really do want to score, there's also the possibility that, you are going to generate movement. So you're taking some of the ring, your opponent might concede some space. So that always leads into, well, what comes next. But the sidekick itself as, a shot to gain some momentum, gain some space, create some movement, and also potentially as a bonus, get that nice clear score like Thomas just got there.
Yeah, like what do we think about when we just use the word threatening? It's something that makes you think twice and makes you move back. It puts you on the back foot. So if you're given a threatening sidekick towards me, it might not score, but now I'm on the back foot. I'm not thinking about attacking or taking the initiative. I'm now kind of being a bit more reactive than the step forward that you get to take.
So I suppose one of the first things that we want to think about in terms of that threat is the position maybe of the kick as well. Because if it's not actually a sidekick, it changes everything, doesn't it? And we'll look at that later, where we see some people who have more of a turning kick kind of shape to their front leg, and maybe in their defense it is a turning kick that they're throwing. But if there isn't that foot between you and your opponent, it isn't threatening in the same way, because they have more options to go directly through that kick. And I think that gets exposed as well the more we try to carry forward.
Yeah, like a heel smashing against your body is much more of a threat than the soft padding of the foot pad.
For sure. So let's look at taking a little bit of space and carrying with that front leg into contact.
See, a lot of these that we've mentioned out so far and the ones that we have to come, they actually cross a lot in terms of the carry is similar to intent and things like that. So there is a lot of crossover, and the more of these that you have that we mentioned today, the better, more of a threat that your sidekick will be. But we see here the carry is important from Red from Slovenia, because they're able to stand tall and push and take the space and put their opponent on the back foot.
And you can't do that if you have poor body positioning. So if you have to concede your body position in order to be able to carry your leg forward, you can't create that threat. So you do need to be able to stand tall over the leg while bringing up a good chamber position. And we could even see where, in this case, red has ended up under, as the lower kick in the exchange. And what that does, when we've talked about this many times before, when you're the one on top, you have the advantage on the next exchange, and and when it comes to hands. And we can see here where red is underneath, not a great position to be in, and Spain in that case has an advantage. So that was Christian Pop actually from Romania in red. But that's the body position that's helping the carry. Any other things that you think help with the carry?
Yeah, I think the carry, it's similar to the posture that we speak about before, like you said, because when you have that tall posture, your back foot then can come underneath you much easier, and then the push that you can get for the carry is more aggressive. And I think we're going to see an example of that here as well. It's like when you can pull that back leg in behind you because your balance is with you, you get a much more aggressive push, and then you can kind of lead into it. And then that's where it couples with the intent that we've seen in the last clip.
Yeah, so definitely that movement of the bottom foot as you go along is what enables the carry, and a lovely shift up there from James. But if the front knee isn't actually high in the first place, carry becomes very hard. If the front knee is low, you're being constantly pulled back towards the ground. So you're going to have to get that front knee a little bit higher. So even where, we'll say with a direct side kick, you can be very effective and come under the guard with a low knee position. But when you want to carry forward, a low knee position hurts you because it's changing the weight distribution. It's pulling you back towards the floor. So if we want to move forward, we need that high knee lift, high chamber position, and that lets and the posture that we were talking about, which lets the bottom foot come underneath. I suppose the only other thing to say about the carry is if you can disguise a shortening of your stance first, either pulling the front foot back to shorten it before you go, or shifting the back foot under to start it before you go, it massively helps with getting the push off, because it's much easier to lift that front knee and get that front knee high from a shorter stance than from that long stance.
True. And plus, when you mentioned there the high knee on the front leg for the carry, it allows you then to change levels as well, which is an important factor that we'll see later.
Yeah, and that hybrid chamber that we were talking about before, where it can evolve itself into a different kick throughout. So talking about the kicking or flicking, and where each one has its use, there's lots of ways of describing what happens with the side kick. But when we're talking threatening, you'd assume straight away, hey, we want this to be a hard side kick.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually had it in here, kick, don't flick at the start, and I changed it to kick or flick because I came across some examples where it actually is nice to have a bit of a disguise on it with a flick first. But
a lighter touch.
They both have their use. But you can see here Adam Shelley is an example of somebody who really aggressive with that front leg, and they're kicking. There's no real flicks to it at the start. They might flick to get the chamber up, but the kick itself is very, very direct, and it's like a stabbing motion. It's almost like kind of like a joust. So you see here it's very direct. There's not much of a chamber position before it. It's almost like a side rising kick as it comes out. So the straight line is very much evident there, and it's just much faster than as well.
Big contrast here between Slovenia and Spain in terms of the way the knee has been taken back towards the chest from Poland there, and the knee being taken back towards the chest to get a more driving motion behind the side kick, versus in that case from Spain the heel being taken towards the backside and a flicking movement.
Yeah, and you ask yourself the question, which one is more of a threat? So like to me, Poland here is a bit more threatening with their side kick because they're getting that more of a push, and we'll see in a minute, like we spoke about the carry, there's not much of a carry there, so it kind of links in with that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And there's your contrast again.
Yeah, and Artem Belov here, he does a great job of flicking first. So he sets a bit of a rhythm with that and sets a pattern, and then boom, hits a long, strong one to the body. So mixing and matching them as well is important, and we'll see the return people get on that when they can disguise and kind of hide their intentions, how much of an impact that can be. Here's another example of it actually from Ruslan. He starts with a flick and switches it to the long shot. So a bit of a flick and then boom. And
we call that kind of the trampoline effect, where you're letting the front foot drop and immediately using the drop of the front leg. You can be used to change the length in your stance, or it can be used to make it explosive, as you can see where Ruslan has dropped there. He's kicked out, but he lands in a very short stance, which makes it easy for him to push away. And then on the defensive side here,
Yeah, it's like Adam's one that we just seen on the defensive, really, isn't it? Just long and direct, and it just lifts to the hip. The hip is going to be the longest line that you have for the side kick as well. So the higher you go above the hip, the less of distance that's going to be between you and your opponent. So that's why the one to the hip is a nice clear shot as well, because it puts distance between you and your opponent, and as well it's very clear for the referees.
But I think what's interesting there is we're not describing any one technique. We're describing lots of variability within, we say, the classification of side kick, and it could be a little bit more like a turning kick. It can be longer, more like a side rising kick. You know, it can have a really fully withdrawn knee for, you know, maximum stamping ability almost.
Yeah.
It can be coming from a short stance, a long stance, you know, and we've discussed even the difference between, you know, when you're going forwards and you want to carry, a short stance is great. When you want to defend, a long stance is great because it gives you room to escape into. So, you know, those kind of things. We're not talking about one, like, technical model of a kick, but we're talking about using the various functions of that kick and the slight variations in that kick to make it effective for its purpose, depending on what the situation is in the match.
But even that as well, like, each individual fighter here doesn't have the same technique either. In the clips that we're seeing, there's like variations and subtle nuances to each one in a way, because of the distance, because of the angle, because of their ring positioning, because of maybe the score in the match. Who knows? Yeah. So there's so many variables there. Like, you never will have the exact same kick.
So taking on that cue of the ring positioning, let's talk about using your side kick to steal space from your opponent, because, you know, the return on your scoring is so much better when you're towards the center of the ring and when your opponent is on the edge.
Yeah, of course. And when we speak about being threatening, of course, invading space is going to be very important for that, because we do compete in a ring, so there's only a limited amount of space you can use, and if you can squeeze that space and reduce the space somebody uses, then you're going to be more threatening than with your techniques, of course.
Absolutely. And there's a separate skill as well that goes with that, which is the tracking of your opponent. And it's, you know, you have to move in a way that the side kick is always available to you. Otherwise there's no point to it. You know, you have to be able to pick it up and respond to your opponent's movement to be threatening. So, you know, closing off those angles, setting up the you know, the expected movement for your opponent really lets you be much more effective.
Yeah, Camille here actually gives an example of that. Look at him taking the space, where Alexander, he lifts his front leg, but he doesn't really get the respect of Camille, so it's not really threatening enough for him to move back. So it's just a nice little contrast there, that you can see the difference between the threatening shot and maybe the not so threatening shot.
Yeah, here we are again.
You have to make your opponent respect your shot and make them move back.
And that's exactly it. I mean, there's always been a separate way of doing it. So you can always threaten the head, which definitely, you know, kind of convinces people to move back. Or you can be strong, which, again, no one wants to stand there and take a powerful shot, even if it's on the arm. But the thing in ITF sparring that people have to respect most is the threat of a score. So, you know, if you're capable of presenting that threat and making it so the person doesn't want to move into your space because of the threat of a score, you know, your side kick's doing a job whether it actually gets the score or not.
Yeah, the springboard side kick that Julio is very, very famously used is an important one for robbing space. You know, if you can use that and bounce off the floor, some people call it the trampoline effect or the springboard effect, whatever you prefer, but the idea is the same. You use very light front leg to drop it quick and bounce up off the floor again. But then you see that idea you mentioned earlier, Adrian, of carrying the back leg in under you. That allows you to get that spring. So see, Julio's back leg is really underneath him. It's not, his body weight isn't in front of it. So when he pushes, he's getting his full explosiveness in that.
Absolutely. And, you know, we can talk about those, you know, and we will talk about those little tips and tricks to disguise your movement. But it's so important, because if you just shorten up your stance, you're very, very vulnerable to being kicked, you know, yourself. And if you're caught in a short stance, you know, or if you're blitzed in a short stance, you're in trouble, because, you know, you don't have the ability to make a major change to your position when your feet get that close together. It gives you the opportunity to push forward very well, or to reach a higher height, you know. So for any given flexibility, you're going to find it easier to get to the maximum range that you have if your stance is shorter, you know. So if you were trying to do a side leg swing from a sitting stance, it's obviously a little bit harder than from a parallel stance, like if we take it back to the traditional side of Taekwondo. But it's the same thing when we're sparring here. So, you know, if we can kind of disguise shortening to that parallel stance kind of length, that shoulder width, kind of position, it's much easier to pick that leg up and shoot forwards. And Julio does that so well with the trampoline style, or the springboard style, where his first one lands much closer to his trailing leg because the trailing leg bounces in, and his opponent isn't paying attention to that because they have a foot out here in their face, causing a distraction.
It's a real threat.
Yeah, exactly. And that lets him make the second shot or the second intention a big threat. And it's like from some of the work I did with fencing years ago, like that's one of the things that they talk about in their terminology. It's, scoring on the first intention or in the second intention. So they will, they've kind of systemized that idea of, well, sometimes you throw something just to get a response, which enables you to do the next thing. And we, of course, do the same things. And in Julio's case here, this is, using the first one to let him change his stance into a more attacking stance, and then he can push forward with much more varied and variable threat. And what that does is it makes it very hard to defend the second intention. If you haven't done something with the first threat that he's thrown at you, it makes the second one so much more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, but when you see this clip here as well, Julio didn't try to make contact with every single shot that he used. So that's the important part about it as well. They're still threatening, but he wasn't going for the shot. So you need to kind of be patient with the front leg as well, and pick the right moments when the distance and the timing is just spot on.
So let's have a look at some of the ideas around the disguising, or even, as you said, putting variety into the shot so that it's not the same shot the person is seeing over and over again.
Yeah, again, we have Julio here with a good example of this, but it's the tempo and the rhythm changes as well, which are important. So we can have variety in changes of the heights. It can be middle section, high section, different techniques, turning kick, side kick, hook kick, axe, whatever. But then as well, you have rhythm changes. So here it's hard to get the timing on this for Belarus to get rid of that leg or to counter it. So it's the kind of switches of the steps, the body positioning, the rhythm, all that linked up together is what makes it very hard to read and puts the other person on the back foot.
Oh, for sure. And even in what Julio did there, the ability to go from using the floor to rebound and go again versus keeping the leg up and carrying and just, taking control of his chamber and going again. Very different skills. There from Sven Hoist, the change, in the downward kick, it's the old classic one. It's going low to high or high to low. It's, you hit once or twice on a particular level and you bring the person's focus there before going to the other level. Same here again from Vitali as he's come into this, and I can see, and just go forward to it, where he's kind of kicked out a couple of times at one range, to kind of get his opponent kind of comfortable at that range, and then he's changed it. So, we can kind of see these kind of short to middle length kind of attempts, the nothing, and then the big step. So it's picking the leg up and showing it, and then the step kind of catches the opponent by surprise. You'll never push in that far, and there it is. So I think, very, very different ways of disguising it or changing the shape of it.
Yeah, there's loads of ways you can do that, and even for a bit of background context on Sven's one, he was banging side kicks for the whole championships on people's body, onto the hip, onto the hip, onto the hip, and then all of a sudden it opens up the head. So it's that setting a pattern that people are saying, okay, this is going to happen, and then boom, they change the pattern and catch people by surprise. Yeah,
absolutely. And as you said, it can be the more stationary kind of vibe where the leg is being picked up, but it's not carrying, to all of a sudden the leg drops and there's a major carry forward. It can be, as you said, varying the heights. It can be varying the speed of the kicks. It can even be varying just the depth, so, kicking out to, quite a close range, knowing that you won't hit your opponent, and then that little bit of a stretch to just sneak in under the front hand onto the hip. But you have to do them without, it's so often that a person will do just that kind of predictable, I'll do two of these and then I do my other one. And, we kind of get used to, okay, but your opponent doesn't have to give you number two, so they can step in at any time. So it's trying to be even more varied than that. It's, can you make your first shot different, in each exchange, or the shape of it. And again, you could enter with sidekick every time. But if your sidekick comes with a different chamber, with a different range on it, with a different preparation on it, and you just make it a little more difficult for your opponent to gauge how it's coming at them, that's huge. it's not necessarily having a different technique to go to every time you begin your exchange.
Yeah, and I think like when we see Julio's one, for example, there, that's what he was doing. He was almost playing with the front leg and almost playing a bit of cat and mouse. He's like, he doesn't have a set pattern of he's going to do hook, turn, axe. It doesn't work like that. He's just lifting the front leg and playing, see what reactions that you give him, and then he's working off that. So that's kind of how it works.
Absolutely. So hopefully people have found this much of it interesting, because, you know, for us chatting about this as we pull the clips together, it just brings ideas to the fore. And with that, we've kind of got a new section to the videos for some people. And Richie, would you like to maybe talk through what we're doing now that's different from before?
Yeah, so we now have a memberships group on YouTube, so you can see the join button should be live by the time this video goes up. So next to the subscribe button, that most of you will be subscribed, I'm sure. If you're not, get on that train. So for what we're going to do for 2022 and going forward, hopefully, is to bring some practical content into the videos. So we're going to be able to show you how to train the things that we mention each Friday. So now if you're sitting at home and you're like, okay, this applies to me, I want to get my psychic more threatening, we're going to actually do a live practical session on how to do that you can watch. Now the session itself is not live, so once you're a member of the channel, you can go and access that and pull the training clips you want and train those yourself. So that's going to be the real value of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think a huge part we're going to look to do with that as well is make it as interactive as we possibly can in terms of the follow-up. So, you know, when the members have come on and watched the videos and they're trying things themselves, they're going to have an experience with it. It'll work for them first time. It'll be breakthrough. It'll change something for them, or it'll be, no, I don't see what you're going for in this. You know, maybe I'm doing it wrong. That's where, you know, the interactivity and the questions can really come up. And, you know, this can be, I think, of huge value to everybody who's involved in it, as well as, you know, of course, all of the members become part of their own group. And there's going to be a lot of like-minded people who have very, very good questions. We know that already. And I think it's going to create a wonderful sharing of practice amongst that community.
Yeah, definitely, because we had to go through a lot of like hardship to come up with these ways of training and a lot of trial and error. So now maybe for other people around the world that don't have access to maybe coaching and stuff that we do in particular parts of the world, this might help you to maybe learn and to get that step up that you want to do to get to that next level.
Absolutely. So hopefully, all going well, you'll be able to click on through onto that, join our little tribe, and give us some feedback and let us know what we're doing, what you'd like to see next, because of course this is our first one, and we hope there'll be many more.
Yeah, definitely. So with that said, the people who will be in the members groups as well, you'll have early access, because obviously people aren't going to join in floods and droves at the start. So you're going to have the access to maybe to put your ideas of what training that you want to get covered over the next couple of weeks, to suggest some topics, to address maybe areas that you're having challenges with and things like that. So get in there early and reap the rewards.
Excellent. So with that, let's leave it there, and we'll see everybody next Friday.
We'll catch you in the next one. Thank you, guys.